Hello and welcome to Nolan Financial Radio. My name is Chris McKinney from Nolan Financial Partners. If you'd like more information about what you hear during our show today, give us a call at 719-210-4242 or visit us online at nolanfinancialpartners.com. And while at our website, click on the radio page, check out our past shows, subscribe to our program on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. So today we're going to dive into a financial cage match. On one side, we have the king of common sense finance, Dave Ramsey. On the other side, the research nerd supreme, Michael Kitces. You haven't heard of these guys? They write a lot about how to retire. You've probably heard Dave Ramsey on this show. So we're going to start with Dave doesn't really care for the 4% rule. It is the gold standard retirement. He calls it moronic. So he says if you only pull out 4%, you're goober. So who's leaving the mountain of money on the table, right? So Dave says you can take 8%. But is that the recipe for a golden retirement, or are you just flipping a coin on your future? We're breaking down the math, the myth, and looking at what Michael Kitces has to say about that. So let's look at Dave's logic. Dave argues that if the stock market averages 12%, inflation is 4%, you have 8% left over to spend without ever touching your principal. So, yeah, maybe, right? So it sounds perfect, right? So it makes retirement feel achievable. Instead of needing $2 million to fund an $80,000 lifestyle, maybe you only need $1 million. So that sounds pretty brave to retire with $1 million and then spend 80,000 of it a year, almost 10%, almost 10% of it a year. So is it really going to last? So the problem is the researchers like Kitces have found that there's a problem. It's called the sequence of returns risk. Okay. So we're not going to get into tax risk because that can happen. We're not going to get into your risk of having to pull more money out because something happened. Maybe something happened with your house. You've got to pull more money out. Maybe something happened with your health. Maybe something happened with your teeth. I've got a client, they spent $27,000 on dental work and they had to do it or not have teeth. So what do? Well, you spend the money on the teeth because you like to eat. So the Kitzes's research shows that, and this is the article he had, the problem with firing at 4%. He points out the 4% rule was made up based on worst case historical scenarios. And that 4% rule was built back in the 80s and 90s. So it was before we had the Great Recession of the 2000s. So a lot of people that I associate with that are financial planners are starting to use 3.5 instead of the 4% rule to make sure that there's money there, right? So the 4% rule is conserved because it has to survive the Great Depression and the 70s stagflation. So it does do that, but it doesn't survive the 2000s. The problem with Dave's 8% is it assumes a pretty straight line that you're going to get 12% every year. And that, inflation's only going to be 4%. Well, we've seen 8.9% in the last few years. So if you lose 20% in year one of retirement and you're still pulling out 8%, the math breaks down hard. You're going to be eating beans and rice for a while. Nobody wants to do that. So the financial independence retirement early guy, Michael Kitces, says 4% might actually be too high, like I mentioned. So if you're looking at a 40 or 50-year retirement because you retired early, 3.5 is probably going to be a better number for you. So it's something that to look at. Now, we don't have to just stick with 3.5%. Okay. It's not that hard of a rule. What we can do is we can start looking at this as a guardrail, right? So say 4% is the middle, but say we have a really good year in the market. Well, maybe we can ratchet up. We can spend a little more. Maybe we can go up to 5% that year. Now, what if our investments go up by 50%? Then we can say, okay, well, maybe we can go up by up to maybe 6% or 8% in that year, but not stick with that rule from year to year. So that's what Michael Kitces says, is that, it's sure 4% is maybe that's a going in plan, but maybe we need to have that adjusted for how well things are going in the economy and with inflation, how much that's getting beat up, and then how well things are going personally for us. So there's lots of data that needs to go into it. So if you have a market boom, then you ratchet up the spending, but you have a guardrail, right? So say the market drops by 30%, how does that affect your money? So if it drops by 30%, maybe we look at what we need to take out of our spending plan for that year. Maybe we put off that travel. Maybe we put off a cruise. Maybe instead of eating at the $100 a plate restaurant, we go to the $20 a plate restaurant, or eat at home. But we've got to pay the rent. We got to pay the mortgage. We got to get our medicines. We got to pay for our transportation. These things we have to pay for. So make sure that you have what you need inside what maybe a 3% draw might look like, right? Because if the market drops by 30%, what do you do? Well, here at Nolan Financial Partners, we have a plan for that. What we do is we have an alternate account to draw from that is not tied to the market. So this is a little outside of their argument about the 4% rule of just market money. So this is mainly just talking about market money. Well, what if you had another account, say, that was not subject to market pressures? And so every time the market went down in a given year, say it lost 30%, and say it lost 50%, like it did from 2021 through the fall of 2022, growth funds lost about 50%. So if your growth funds lost 50%, do you continue to spend that capital, or do you start pulling money from somewhere else so that you can let that capital grow back? And so to us, it's having a spending plan that coincides with these rules so that we're not going to run out of money, and we're going to have a place to go to when the market's not supporting our spending habits, right? So people aren't robots as well, right? So we don't spend money the same way every year. We sometimes do this or we do that. Sometimes we'll spend next year's money this year because we want to go on this really nice cruise. So we'll spend next year's cruise money on this year's cruise money. So next year, when the market goes down and we've already spent next year's money, oh no, we don't have that. So how you kind of see your money and how you behave in your relationship with that money matters a lot more than that spreadsheet. But having a plan that works with you to create guardrails, to create ratchet effects so I can have more fun, and guardrails so I can pull back if I need to. That's a really good thing to think about and to have in your back pocket so that we don't run out of money before we run out of life. So who should we listen to? The Dave Ramsey, who says, just spend the money And then there's Kitsis's and Bergen, who made the 4% rule. Very, very nerdy types that you want to have that Monte Carlo simulation that you get that 95% chance of never running out of money. You might die with a huge pile of cash you never enjoyed, right? So there's something in between, right? If the market tanks in year 2 of your retirement, how does that affect your retirement? Can you survive that? Well, I had a client, he couldn't. He was a Delta pilot. Guess what happened to him? This was before I met him. He retired, and then 9/11, 2001 happened, and most of his money was still over at Delta. He hadn't pulled it all out yet, and a lot of it was tied in with Delta stock. And so he lost over 50% of his retirement dollars in the course of about a month. So what did he do? Well, he called up Delta and said, "Hey, can I come back to work?" Well, guess what Delta had just done? They just cut a bunch of flights. So they didn't have work for him. He got on their wait list, and eventually he did go back to work. He built back his nest egg back up, and then he was a lot more purposeful with it after that. So you don't want to die with a huge pile of cash that you didn't get to enjoy. So maybe you don't want to be the nerds, but you also don't want to run out of money. So you don't want to be like Dave Ramsey and just say, "Yeah, just spend that 8% every year. It'll be fine." You want to have that flexibility. There's no autopilot for how this works. You want to have that flexible rules that start somewhere between 3 and 5%, but also have that alternative account so that you can have the retirement that you want, but find a financial professional that can build a customized plan for you and how you want to spend your money. Because, like I said, retirement starts with how you're going to spend your money and what you're going to spend your money on. It does not start with how much money you have. How much money you have decides when you can retire, and then how you align that money with how you want to spend it. Because once you get things aligned with your spending habits, your spending plan, with how much money you have, that's when it works. It's also about having that lifestyle of your dreams. So make sure that you understand how to do that. If you don't understand, all this seems like a lot, right? Lots of numbers. We went through lots of numbers. Give us a call, 719-210-4242. We've got some complimentary consultations set aside. Check us out, NolanFinancialPartners.com. Got a beautiful website, lots of horses on it. Give us a call, 719-210-4242. We'll set up that complimentary, no charge consultation. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about for the rest of this radio program was, okay, so I've got all this money, but do I really have it all in one place? So maybe I have a Roth, maybe I have an IRA, maybe I have money in an annuity, maybe I have money in a cash value whole life plan, maybe I have money in the bank, maybe I have money in pensions. Maybe these pensions are kind of depends on how the pension works. Not all pensions work exactly the same. Some of them actually run out. I have a client, they've got a pension that runs out. So I've got all this money floating around. How do I make it gel with a retirement plan so that I get the most out of it? Because I want to, if I plan to live to 95, how do I not run out of money? So that's kind of the target we use is about 95. So why do we use 95? Well, because the chances of you living into your 90s, if you don't have cancer or don't have diabetes right now, and you're over 60, are quite good to live into your early 90s. So that's how we create our plans. So you want to think about all your money as a flow and how the taxes impact that. So once we start thinking about how taxes influence it, do we want to pay more in taxes at the beginning of our retirement or more toward the end of our retirement? Well, would you say taxes are low now and maybe you're going to get higher later? Well, what influences that decision? Well, maybe the fact that there's a $38 trillion debt by our country, and we're continuing to grow that debt. We have not had a government, since, gosh, I think the 90s that didn't add to our debt, right? And every year they've been adding to the debt. It just keeps going up. I think it's about 60% of our tax dollars go to pay for the debt or something like that. So don't quote me from that. I didn't read that article yet because it changes, right? It's a moving target. So how do we organize those? Well, that's something that you create a plan for, so that you make sure that your taxes are aligned with how you want to pay your taxes. Because guess what? In retirement, you get to decide how you pay your taxes, when you pay your taxes, by the amount of money that you pull from those retirement accounts that have taxes that are owed. Now, some things that if you have stocks, you do not have to pay stocks until you realize the gains on them. So that's pretty good. So stocks are maybe you put those down the road, right? So, but then they start getting bigger, and you have to realize those gains at some point. So it all will come to integrate into how your plan is formed, so that you have the best type of retirement, right? So because maybe you want to spend more money in retirement in the first half of your retirement, okay? Because you're more active, you're healthier, you can travel more, you can do things. Maybe you have some bucket list items like going to Machu Picchu or hiking Mount Kilimanjaro or going to Japan and going up Mount Fuji, things that require you to be healthy and to be able to be outside for 12 hours walking around. Maybe it's, going down the rapids in the Colorado River and the Royal Gorge, or maybe the Grand Canyon, or maybe just, what is it that you want to do in retirement? That's where you got to start looking at your plan, how the money is going to flow out to you, and then how will that support you throughout the whole period of your life. So it starts with that spending plan, figuring out what your spending is going to be in retirement. What do I need? So I need I need healthcare, I need shelter, I need food, I need transportation. Those are the main things I have to have, and all the things that go with that: property taxes, the fees you have to maintain a car, whether they be government tags or gas or maintenance. All those things need to be in the needs column, and you want to get a good idea of kind of what that looks like. Here's something that my mom did and my dad did early on, and my mom is still doing this today. Is she started an auto fund, and that was to pay for a new automobile on about a 10-year schedule. So they started this in the 70s. They were putting in about $100 a month. They started this back in the 70s, so $100 a month. And that way They looked at, what's a car payment is. What would be an auto payment if I borrowed money for a car, went and bought a new car? What would be the payment? Well, okay, that's what I'm going to start saving. And so they would save it, and then they would go buy the new car with the money they had. Because that's how a lot of people did it in the 70s. People weren't so eager to go get a loan for things. But now my mom, she's still to this day, that's how she does it. When she needed a new car, we went down to the dealership. This was just 2 years ago, and she wrote a check to buy her new car because she had the savings in that savings account. And so you can imagine that savings account has continued to get really big, and it's because she hasn't had to buy cars that often as she expected. And then she ratcheted up that account by whatever you would pay today to go buy a car that you might want. What would be the loan cost? So this goes to the spending plan. So she already has that spending plan built into her plan. So even if she went and got the loan, she has a budget, a spending plan that supports paying for that car. Even if she had the cash or didn't have the cash, she could still go buy the car. So that's a good way to think about it, is maybe you're not going to spend the money cash to buy the vehicle, but the fact that it's part of your spending plan, you don't have to change it. So it's a really great concept. That it's one of the first financial things I learned when I was a teenager that my parents did to manage their finances so that they had all the money they needed to support us, to take care of our food, shelter, clothing, health care, dental care, because dental care for kids is expensive because we all had terrible teeth. So that's how you can start to think about your spending plan. Is maybe, I know I'm going to buy a car. Okay, well, let's go ahead and put that payment into our plan so that when we do go into retirement, we have that money. Even if we don't end up using the money to buy it, it's part of our spending plan. Okay. So this is just an example of the things that go into a spending plan that we often miss, right? We often miss how we're going to pay for things that are out of schedule. Now we can just pull the money out of our capital and go buy the car fresh, but then that is out of our spending plan. So, but if we include that in our spending plan, and then we either don't move that money, or we keep it in some kind of, we account for it, right? So it's accounted for, so that we have the money we need to do all the things we want to do and have the nice things that you want in retirement. So, getting my mom a new car that was safer, that had all the nanny minders for when she was driving, because she's 80, she'll be 84 this year. So her paying attention to driving is not the best. But that car reminds her, keeps her in the lines on the interstate when she's going and moving at a high speed, lets her know if there's a car in the next lane, and won't let her pull into anybody that's in the next lane. So these are real good things to help keep our older people alive, is cars that watch out for them. But anyway, so we're getting back into the spending plan, making sure that we have all our essentials for that spending plan inside there. Then we break out what things that we like to do, and then maybe rank order those so that we're putting money into those buckets as part of our spending plan for all the non-essential things that we really want to do. And we've got that part of it. And then if we have market forces make us pull back a little bit, we know what to do already. We know where to pull back. If we have an expansion, well, we kind of know where to start adding money for that too. Because instead of going on the 6-day cruise, we go on the 12-day cruise. Instead of going, for 1 week to Hawaii, we go to for 2 weeks in Hawaii to get away from the snow here in Colorado. So that's how we can start thinking about our spending plan. So you've gotten a really good idea about how I think about spending money. We all have money. We're going to spend it. We need to make sure that we know how we're going to spend it. And then we make sure that our money is aligned with how we're going to spend it. And that's where we come in and helping you build that plan, making sure your assets are in places that you get the rate of returns that you need for your retirement dollars, making sure that you have money in the right kinds of money with the right kind of tax situation associated with that money for your needs, right? Because you don't want too much taxable money. You want, how do I push taxes down the road? So I'm not a CPA. I'm not a tax attorney. So we don't give tax advice, but we give you money advice. And sometimes money advice leaks over into taxes a little bit. So we kind of start to understand those things. So if you want to set up time with us to find out what your spending plan should look like in retirement, give us a call at 719-210-4242. Excuse me, 719-210-4242. If you want to find out more about how Social Security is going to impact your spending plan in retirement, we can run a diagnostic, does 20,000 calculations, and figures out the best time for you to take your Social Security. Give us a call at 719-210-4242. Check us out at our website, NolanFinancialPartners.com. But give us a call. We've got Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday set up for that complimentary consultation. Give us a call, 719-210-4242. So join us again. Really enjoyed talking with you this week. We'll talk to you next week, same time, same place. Enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.